I'm Michelle Malte for the Los Angeles Times, and today was the Worldwide Developers Conference keynote, the opening of what is an extravaganza for developers in San Francisco. And with me is Sal Rodriguez. Hi, Sal.
Hey Michelle, how's it going?
Great. I'm interested in hearing what we've got from Apple. Has Apple lost its mojo, or are there still cool things in the pipeline?
Yeah, there's quite a bit that they showed off. This year wasn't as extensive as some previous years when it comes to Worldwide Developers Conference, but what they did announce was pretty substantial, and they focused on just two things, which was OS X and iOS 8. And I mean, that's what this conference is about. So in other years, they've used it to announce iPhones, sometimes a new Mac computer here or there. But this year, they really stuck to the core of the developers conference, and it was, giving the developers a heads up on what to expect. For consumers, that means a lot of new features on upcoming operating systems that will be available to developers today and be available for the general public this fall.
You noted in one of your pieces on the tech blog that the average person might be able to sign up for a beta on iOS 8.
Yeah, so you can so you can do that for iOS 8. I mean, from what they announced, it doesn't seem like that'll be available for iOS 8, but it will be available for OS X Yosemite. So basically, the way it works is usually they announce the product, then they release it to developers. That way, they can get a head start on making the next versions of their apps. That way, whenever these two pieces of software are released, there are brand new apps ready to go along with them right away. But this year they're changing it up a little bit, and if you want to try out the new version of OS X, which is what you run on a Mac or a MacBook, you can sign up for that. And I tweeted out the link to that. You can check it out. And
Sal, you can find him on Twitter at Sal19.
Yeah, exactly. And I signed up for that page today, and it seems like there might be a little bit of a wait for it. I know the first time I tried clicking the link, it wasn't coming up right away, which sometimes can be a sign that traffic was pretty heavy. And it also didn't say, here you go, here's Yosemite. It said, we'll notify you when this is available. So, but that is new and interesting. So it's kind of like, if you don't mind dealing with a piece of software that's not completely ready yet, and of course there could be bugs and glitches, and sometimes they're pretty substantial. For example, I tried out the developer version of iOS 7 last year, and as neat and pretty as it was to look at, I mean, it was draining my battery like crazy, and some apps just straight up weren't working at all either. So there's it's pretty neat to try out software before it comes out, but there are some risks that you take with it.
Now, okay, we talked about how you can get it. Let's talk about what it is. What are the coolest features of OS 10 and iOS 8?
All right, so the biggest one with OS X Yosemite is honestly simply, the biggest thing for me was how Apple is really just blurring the line between what your phone is and what your Mac is. And what I mean by that is that now when Yosemite comes out, you'll be able to pick up phone calls that are sent to your iPhone from your Mac. So you might have your phone in another room and somebody calls you, and you won't have to get up and pick up your phone to make a call. The call will also ring on your machine, so you can pick up right on the screen, and then you can basically it'll kind of work like a Bluetooth speaker for your phone, and you can make the call using your machine's microphone and speakers. Now, Apple didn't exactly get into details into how exactly this is working, but it seems like the iPhone is relaying the information either through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or something. I'm sure there'll be more specifics on this as developers get their hands on this new feature. But that's pretty neat. Another thing is an extension of not exactly iMessage, but if you're an Apple user now, you know that you can send text messages to your friends who own Apple devices using an iPad or your MacBook. So I mean, that is really awesome. It makes me appreciate whenever my friends have iPhones, and it makes me really mad whenever my friends do not have iPhones. But Apple's solving that, and now you'll be able to send text messages to your friends whether they have an Android or Windows phone or even just a flip phone. It doesn't matter, and so that's a pretty cool new feature that we'll see whenever Yosemite comes out. And again, it's just really just blurring the line of I mean, it's basically the iPhone is just a smaller screen version of your Mac, and your Mac is just a big version of your iPhone, basically.
I liked that I think one of the things you noted that was that you can start an activity on one and pick it up where you left off, like an email maybe. You start it on your iPhone and then you pick it up. I know I do that. I try to do something like that on my desktop, on
Yeah,
my
so
laptop.
I think Apple recognizes that this is how people are using their devices, so they also announced a feature called Handoff, and basically your devices will be able to detect whenever they're in proximity of each other. So say you're finishing up an email on your iPad or something, and then you go to sit down next to your Mac. An icon will appear like toward the bottom of the screen on your iPad that will let you essentially hand off the task to your Mac, and then when you open the Mac, it'll seemingly be on that screen. Now, I haven't gotten a chance to try this feature out, so I'm not exactly sure how exactly it works, what are its limitations, and all of that. But yeah, Apple just wants to make it easier for users to just, as soon as you got to get up and use your mobile device, you can keep working on whatever it was that you were doing on your Mac.
There are two features that I was personally interested in. One of them was better photo editing on the iPhone or iDevices, and the other was family share. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, so basically Apple really wants to revamp all of its photo editing. This is something that's going to come to both iOS 8, so your iPhone and iPad, and then OS X sometime next year. They focus more on the mobile version of it because that's what's going to happen sooner. But basically, yeah, they want you to be able to have even more editing capabilities through the main iOS Photos app. And they also announced app extensions. And what this means is that you can be editing, and app developers, for example, like let's just say Instagram, for example, they could add code to their app so that whenever you're editing using the Apple Photos app, you can quickly activate it so that you can use Instagram's editing features, and then as soon as you're done with that, it'll go right back to the Apple Photos app, but it'll feel like you never really left or changed, really the screen at all. It'll be very seamless. So yeah, they're going to be adding more of their own editing tools, and they're going to make it easier to use third-party app developers' tools. They're also just revamping, how everything is organized. Now, whenever you take a photo, everything will be saved directly to the cloud, which kind of was already available before, but now they just want that to be even more pervasive. And they're also lowering the prices of their iCloud accounts. That way you can pay $1 per month and have 20 gigabytes of cloud storage, which is what you'll need if you're really just want access to all the photos that you've ever taken on your iPhone and iPad and all that in the same spot without running up the space on your phone, which I know is an issue for me.
Yes, yes. I've gotten the largest size phone and I still run out of space.
Yeah, so we'll see how that works out. And they also are going to make it easier for users to like search for photos. You can search for when a photo was taken or where a photo was taken. So that's pretty neat. It's not as extensive as like what Google has announced previously. Like with Google Plus, you can literally search for like beach or snow, and it'll look for photos that it detects has those kinds of characteristics. So if we would have seen that, that would have been just a total home run. But at least this is something that makes it way more helpful for people who are bad about deleting or finding their photos. The other one that you touched on is family sharing, and so this is also pretty interesting because it's like one or two words, but it encapsulates quite a bit of things. Probably the most obvious one is that now up to 6 people can use the same credit card on their iTunes accounts, and this will allow them to share any content that they purchase. So if you buy a song, you buy an ebook, you buy a movie, everyone who is on your little iTunes family plan, per se, will have access to that content. But they'll also extend this to everyone will be able to like kind of see what's on each other's calendars, or share photos. I'm sure there will be settings so that your mom doesn't see what you're doing on Thursday that she doesn't need to know about. But we haven't gotten those details quite yet. But probably the most helpful part of this whole family sharing is for parents, because they'll be able to set limitations on what children purchase. So if you have a kid who likes to run up your account by just making a ton of in-app purchases on their favorite game, now there'll be limitations that they can place. And of course, this is very reactionary. Apple faced a class action lawsuit, I believe, where parents were complaining that there was just no safeguards for them to prevent this from happening. And now when a kid tries to make a purchase, their parent will be first alerted of this, and they'll have to approve it on the spot before that purchase goes through. So that's very helpful for anyone who shares their device with a kid who's got an itchy shopping finger.
I've got to tell you, Sal, in my family, my husband is the audiophile. He's taken a lot of time to cultivate and curate his iTunes account and with ratings and all of that. It doesn't sound like we'll be able to go back. It's sort of moving forward if you're using the same credit card.
They really didn't touch on that, so it's not clear if if previous purchases will be shareable with other people. Usually when this kind of technology comes out, they try to go back and fix that, but that's not the top priority. It's usually future purchases are what will be incorporated right away, and then sometimes they go back and make it so that you can incorporate those previous purchases. But Apple didn't really give any clarification as to how that will work.
There were 3 additional new features that I made note of. Most of you have probably autocorrect issues. QuickType, is that likely to change our world? Will it no longer be damn you autocorrect? Is it going to be darn you QuickType?
Probably. I mean, it's probably not going to fix autocorrect's issues. It's just going to make typing a little quicker and a little easier. Basically, what they're adding is a feature that's been available on some other platforms for quite a while. Most notably, Google has had this for at least 2, if not 3 years. Basically, now when you type, Apple will show 3 little word suggestions at the top of the keyboard. So, the example that they used is someone sends you a text message saying, "Hey, are you up for dinner or a movie?" And this quick type is also very smart. So, in that example, 2 of the suggestions were dinner or a movie. So you could quickly just pick that one, respond, and you didn't have to type anything, which is pretty awesome. As someone who tests Android phones all the time, that is one of the features that I would love to see on Apple, and I'm glad that it's finally coming. It's a straight-up copy of one of their competitors, but the competitors sometimes copy Apple's best feature, so I'm totally happy that they're doing that. Another thing, which was when they announced QuickType, I was like, wow, that's very un-Apple-like. But what was even more un-Apple-like was when they said that you'll be able to install keyboards that are developed by third-party developers. That means that you will no longer have to use Apple's keyboard if you hate it. This again is another thing that has been around for Android for years. I mean, since almost the very first Androids, you could go and download a keyboard that was made by someone completely unrelated to Google, and it seems like that will be the case here with Apple as well. Now, with non-Apple apps and non-Apple features, there are usually limitations compared to what Apple has made. But for a lot of people, this will be a very welcomed addition. If you're a fan of the swipe feature, it looks like that's one of the things that will probably be coming, like one of the keyboards that will probably be available for download. So yeah, I mean, it's more choice for Apple customers. And if you ever get into a heated debate with an Android fan, that's one of the big criticisms, is that it's kind of like just a gated garden where you're really not allowed to make too many choices. Everything's kept simple. But if you want to go beyond that, you can't really do that. So this is for the more techie Apple users, I'm sure it's a very welcome addition.
And then 2 last things that were notable were HealthKit and HomeKit.
So HealthKit and HomeKit are more developer things. For the consumers, what they'll be concerned with is, in terms of HealthKit, what they'll be concerned with is health. And this is an app that will basically store any data that they get from any health apps that they use. So me, for example, I use the Nike Plus running app, to track my runs and all that, okay? So presumably when health comes out, those 2 apps will be connected, and health will show me all my information right there, as well as any other health apps that I might use. So if you're like a total health fitness buff, this will put all of that information into one nice little dashboard that's, much more digestible than going to, like 5 different apps to make this work. With HomeKit, that was, something that they just barely touched on, but it seems that basically what they called it was a protocol, so that, all these new companies that are coming out with smart products kind of have like a few standards to meet, and presumably this will make a more standardized ecosystem, which, Apple is a fan of having, things, very standardized. That way it works for everyone. So this is, just the very early stages of smart products. So customers might not really start to see the results of this new protocol until like maybe a year from now. But hopefully this will make it easier for, gadgets to work well with iPhones and iPads as well as with one another. And, some of the examples that they use were, like smart, doorknobs, or, smart light bulbs and all that. And the
garage
example,
door openers.
yes, garage door openers. The example that Apple Senior Vice President Craig Federighi, if that's how you pronounce his name, said is that, you could activate Siri and say, okay, Siri, I'm ready for bed, and then, presumably everything, Siri will give that command to all the smart products that meet this protocol, and go to your default settings for when you're ready to go to sleep.
Now, somebody tweeted our colleague Chris O'Brien and said, Siri's got to get a little smarter. I'm afraid if I say turn on the air, it might start the oven.
Well, I mean, over the past few years, Apple's definitely done a good job improving Siri. But it does. We'll have to see how it does with these smart products. But hopefully it works much better than when it was first released back in 2010.
So
2011.
A bunch of new, interesting software features. Sal will continue to cover them, as will Chris O'Brien. So last thoughts. What does this mean, if anything, as we're looking toward a product release, maybe this fall, this winter?
Well, I mean, just in terms of last thoughts, like the last thing I'd want to touch on is, or one of the last things I'd want to touch on is, OS X Yosemite. One of the big things is that it's just getting a brand new, I mean, not completely brand new, but a pretty drastic overhaul of its look. Like a lot of the elements that Apple introduced last year with iOS 7, the very vibrant colors, the flat design, and the extensive use of translucent menus, that's being brought over. And that's just another example of, Apple, continuing to blur the lines between what's a computer and what's your iPhone and all that. They just want it to be basically the same thing and an extension of each other. So that's pretty interesting.
And notifications looked quite the same.
Yeah, they're also adding the Today menu to the desktop, or to your Mac, which was a feature that was introduced last year for your iPhone and your iPad. In terms of what this means for future products, like Apple would never confirm this, but I mean, you can basically bet that when they say iOS 8 comes out this fall, they're also basically saying that the next iPhone comes out this fall. So right now it looks like that's probably still going to be September, but the last couple of years it's been either September or October. So you can, if you're wondering if you should update your phone now or not, those are probably the time that a new iPhone will come out. In terms of OS X, they don't usually like time the release of their desktop software to a particular computer. But there is some talk that there might be new MacBook Airs with Retina displays coming out. So maybe if they wanted to time it, that might be something to look forward to. But who knows?
Who knows? Well, we will continue to follow your coverage. Sal Rodriguez, you can follow him at @Sal19 on Twitter. I'm Michelle Malte for the Los Angeles Times. Thanks for joining us.